Hello everyone, welcome to the Criminology Live. It is as in the previous last two lectures, actually last 2.5 lectures we have been discussing about criminology, back to our criminology lecture series. In the previous lecture, we traced the historical development of criminology. We learned how societies moved from private revenge, blood feuds, religious punishment, and trial by ordeal towards rational laws, fair procedures, and scientific explanations of crime. In today's lecture, we will start studying two very important schools of criminology. We actually have studied about schools of criminology in the second lecture, but in this lecture, we will dive deep into classical school of criminology, also about neoclassical schools of criminology. These two schools are extremely important because they laid the foundation of modern criminal law, criminal justice, deterrence, proportional punishment, and the idea of individual responsibility. By the end of this lecture, you will be able to explain the meaning, the principles, thinkers, merits, criticisms, and present relevance of classical and neoclassical schools of criminology. So, starting ahead, what is a school of criminology? What do you mean by school of criminology? Before discussing the classical school, we should understand the meaning of schools in criminology. A school of criminology is a group of thinkers who share similar ideas about why people commit crime, whether people have free will, what should be the purpose of punishment, how offenders should be treated, how crime can be prevented. Different schools give different answers to these questions. For example, the classical school says that people commit crime because they make a rational choice. The positivist school, which we will discuss in a later lecture, says that crime may be influenced by biological, psychological, or social factors. So coming towards the background of the classical school developed in Europe during the 18th century, especially during the age of Enlightenment. The Enlightenment was a period when philosophers began to challenge superstition, arbitrary authority, torture, cruel punishment, and unequal treatment under the law. At the time, criminal justice system in many parts of Europe were harsh and unfair. Punishments often included torture, public execution, branding, mutilation, whipping, and imprisonment in extremely poor conditions. The laws were often unclear. Judges had wide discretionary powers. Wealthy and powerful persons could sometimes avoid punishments, while poor persons could be punished severely for even minor offenses. The classical school emerged as a reaction against this injustice. It demanded a criminal justice system based on reason, fairness, certainty, proportionality, and equity before law. Meaning of classical school, as we move towards the meaning of classical school, the classical school is based on the belief that human beings are rational individuals who possesses free will. The classical school believes in free will theory. According to this school, people are capable of understanding the consequences of their actions. They can choose between lawful conducts and unlawful conduct. Therefore, when a person commits a crime, it is assumed that the person has made a choice. The classical school doesn't focus mainly on the personality, the background, family, or mental condition of the offender. Instead of all these, as mentioned, the classical school focuses on the criminal act. It focuses on the act itself. The central question here is what offense was committed and what punishment should be given for that offense. This is the central question of classical school of criminology. what is the offense, the committed offense is what, and what punishment should be awarded for that offense. The classical school believes that punishment could be sufficient to discourage crime, but it shouldn't be cruel, excessive, or arbitrary. Now moving ahead to the main principles of the classical school, the first principle is that free will principle. The first and the most important principle of classical school is the free will principle. The classical school believes that every normal person has the freedom to choose between right and wrong. For example, if a person sees an unattended mobile phone in a public place, that person can choose either to return it or to give it to police or to steal it. If the person knowingly steals it, the classical school assumes that the person has chosen to commit theft. Therefore, the person can be held responsible for the act. That's the free will theory, or the first theory of classical school of criminology. Coming next, the theory of rationality, or the principle of rationality of classical school of criminology. This school assumes that human beings are rational. A rational person considers the likely benefit and consequences of the action. Before committing a crime, a person may think of what will I gain from this crime? What is the chance of being caught? What punishment I may receive if I am caught? If the expected gain appears greater than the expected punishment, the person may decide to commit crime. Therefore, the classical school argues that the punishment should be certain and proportionate, so that the possible pain of punishment is greater than possible pleasure or benefit of the crime. Next, moving ahead from free will and rationality, the third principle of classical school of criminology is hedonism. Hedonism is the pleasure and pain principle. The classical school is closely connected with the idea of hedonism. Hedonism means that human beings generally seek pleasure and pain. According to this idea, crime may be attractive because it can bring money, it can bring power, revenge, excitement, or small other benefits. Punishment creates pain or disadvantages. Therefore, if punishment is sufficiently certain and proportionate, it can discourage a person from committing a crime. This is the basic principle of deterrence even, and this is actually hedonism, or principle of pleasure and pain. That is our third principle of classical school of criminology. Coming next, the social contract principle. Classical thinkers believed that people live in society through an implied social contract. A social contract means that individuals agree to give up some personal freedom in exchange for security and social order. For example, people agree not to steal, not to assault, cheat, or kill others. In return, the state provides protection through laws, police, courts, and other institutions. When a person commits a crime, that person breaks the social contract. Therefore, the state has the right to punish the offender, but only according to the law, not arbitrary punishment, nothing else. The state cannot punish people arbitrarily. This is very important principle of social contract, that state cannot punish people arbitrarily. It must be by the book, by the law. Coming to the next fifth principle of classical school, that is equality before the law. The classical school strongly supports equality before law. The same law should apply to rich and the poor, powerful and the weak, men and the women, and the persons from different social groups. Punishment also should be based on the seriousness of the offense, not on social status of the offender. the principle later become an essential feature of constitutional democracies and modern legal systems. So this is the principle of equality before law, which is one of the pillars of classical school of criminology. The next principle is legality. Classical school supports the principle of legality. What this means? This means that no person should be punished unless the act was clearly defined as a crime by law before it was committed. This principle is often expressed in Latin as nullum crimen sine lege, nulla poena sine lege. I don't understand Latin actually, so my spelling may be something different. It literally means that no crime without law and no punishment without law. This is a very basic principle of classical school of criminology, that no crime is without law and no punishment is without law. In simple words, a person cannot be punished for doing something that is not legally prohibited at the time of the act. This principle protects citizens from arbitrary use of state power. So this is our sixth principle of classical school of criminology. Come to seventh principle, it is about proportionality of punishment. The classical school believes that punishment should be proportionate to the seriousness of the offense. A minor offense should not receive an extremely severe punishment. For example, a person who commits a minor theft shouldn't be receiving the same punishment as a person who commits a murder. So the punishment between theft and murder should be different. The purpose of punishment is not revenge. It is to create a fair and predictable system of punishment. Proportionality in punishment is still a central principle in sentencing and criminal justice system. So proportionality of punishment principle is the cornerstone of classical school of criminology. Coming to principle number 8, it is about certainty, swiftness and severity of punishment. Classical thinkers emphasized three features of punishment, that is number 1, certainty, number 2, swiftness, and number 3, severity. Among these, certainty is considered the most important principle. Certainty in criminal justice system is one of the most important features. A person is more likely to avoid crime if they believe that they will definitely be caught and punished. Swiftness means, on the other hand, punishment should follow the offense without unnecessary delay. There is a famous saying in law that justice delayed is justice denied, particularly in Indian context. So swiftness in criminal justice system is a very important factor. Next, coming to severity. Severity means that the punishment should be serious enough to outweigh the expected benefit of the crime. Severity means the punishment should be enough. It should be proportionate and enough with respect to the amount of crime. Okay. However, severity should never become cruelty. We must look into severity from an objective point of view, that it should not become cruelty. A small but certain punishment may be more effective than a very harsh punishment that is rarely imposed. So this is the principle of certainty, swiftness, and severity of punishment. So these are the prime principles of classical schools of criminology. If we move ahead with the thinkers of classical school, we have already discussed in last lecture. We are going in more details in this lecture. So the father of classical school, or the father of actually criminology, is Cesar Beccaria. So going ahead with the Cesar Beccaria and the classical school of criminology. Cesar Beccaria was one of the most important thinkers of classical school. He was born in Italy in 1739. In 1764, he published his famous book It's on crimes and punishment. The name of the book is very important for exam purposes or for anyone studying criminology. It is on crimes and punishment, which was published in 1764. This book strongly criticized the criminal justice practices of that time. Beccaria opposed torture, secret trials, arbitrary punishments, cruel executions, and unequal laws. He argued that the power to punish belongs to the state only because people have agreed to it through the social contract. The power to punish someone who has done a crime, that power belongs to the state. That means state judicial system, not unto some individual entity, not into some individual family or individual structure. It belongs to the state. Why? Because the society has obligation to the state. The society has bondage, and society is under the state. Society has a trust on the state. Okay, this is called social contract with the state. Therefore, punishment should be limited by law and should be used only when necessary for public safety. Okay, the punishment must be limited by the law. It must be by the book of law and must be necessary for public safety, not arbitrary. Okay, so Cesar Beccaria's major ideas we are going with. Cesar, his major ideas are like laws should be clear and public. Citizens should know that conduct is prohibited, what conduct is prohibited, and what punishment may follow. That means the books of criminal laws or the social binding principles should be open, like in every major civilized states, like in USA, UK, Australia, India, or any other countries, in any other democratic countries. Actually, the criminal laws are open. I mean, anyone can go and buy a book of criminology, or of criminal law. Okay, even though he may not be able to practice for others, but he has the right to know. Okay, so citizens should know what conduct is prohibited and what punishment it may follow. Secret laws create injustice because people cannot follow laws that they do not know. In some states, like in some authoritarian state, in some kingdoms, still there are some secret laws. Okay, there are a lot more secret laws which are overnight even constructed. So people have less trust in such regimes or in such criminal justice systems, because why would someone believe in a systems where there may be overnight law of crime? Okay. So this is one of the thoughts of Beccaria, that laws should be clear and public. Next thought we can term as judges should not make arbitrary laws. Judges should apply the law, not create punishment according to their according to their personal wishes. I mean, judges must go by the book. Okay, judges must go what is written in the books, what is framed by the constitution, not by their personal thought, not by their personal bias or wishes. This reduces the risk of biasness and unequal treatment. This is very important. Okay. Beccaria's next thought, we can say that punishment should be certain rather than cruel. This is very important. Beccaria believed that certainty of punishment is more effective than extreme severity. Certainty of punishment is having more deterrent effect than the severity of punishment. A person may take the risk of committing crime if the chances of being caught is very low or chances of being released is very high, even if the punishment is severe. Okay. So this is one of the thoughts of Beccaria. Next, Beccaria thought about that punishment should be proportionate, as we have already discussed. The seriousness of punishment should match the seriousness of offense. He also thought that torture should be abolished. It is one of the prime contributions of Beccaria that torture should be abolished. Beccaria strongly opposed torture. He argued that torture does not prove truth. A physically weak, innocent person may confess under pain, while a strong or guilty person may remain silent. So even if we torture someone, and if he is physically strong enough, how much torture we impose upon him, it doesn't matter if he can bear it. Okay. On the contrary, if someone is very weak, and a little amount of torture would reveal everything, even what he has not committed, he will say that yes, I have committed this out of the pain. Okay. So torture, Beccaria strongly opposed the torture. Torture is both cruel and unreliable. Beccaria also was against the death penalty. He said that death penalty should be limited or abolished. Beccaria questions the usefulness of capital punishment. He argued that long-term punishment may be a stronger and more lasting deterrent than a single execution. It's still a matter of debate, since a lot more countries having capital punishment still in place, including India, USA, France, and other countries. I don't know about France, but yeah, definitely India, USA, and some other countries. But they come in very limited numbers, not like before. So death penalty should be limited, or if possible, it need to be abolished. So these were the thoughts of Cesar Beccaria, death penalty should be limited or abolished, torture should be abolished, punishment should be proportionate, punishment should be certain rather than cruel, judges shouldn't make arbitrary laws, laws should be clear and public. So these were Beccaria's ideas, or Beccaria's thoughts on the classical school of criminology. So coming ahead with Jeremy Bentham. Jeremy Bentham was another major thinker of classical school. Bentham was born in England in 1748. He developed the theory of utilitarianism. Okay, utilitarianism means the laws and policies should aim for the greatest happiness of the greatest number. According to Bentham, human beings are governed by two forces. One is pleasure, another is pain. Okay. In classical school of criminology, the second principle or third principle of pleasure and pain is very important. People generally try to increase pleasure and reduce pain. Therefore, a person may commit crime when the expected pleasure or gain is greater than the expected pain of the punishment. So these are some of the thoughts of Jeremy Bentham, who was one of the major thinkers of classical school of criminology. His theory was based on utilitarianism, and he focused more on pleasure and pain. Jeremy Bentham developed one idea, that is felicific calculus. He developed the idea of felicific calculus. It was also called hedonistic calculus. Felicific calculus, also called hedonistic calculus. This means that a person may mentally calculate the likely pleasure and pain of an action before acting. It is the mental calculation before committing a crime. Mental calculation of pleasure and pain before committing the crime, or before moving ahead with the deviant action. For example, before committing a robbery, an offender may think, how much money can I get out of it? How likely am I be caught? What punishment might I receive? What is the risk owed period? Whether the risk owed the reward? So these are the things, these are the considerations that one person make before committing a crime. Okay. So if the person believes that the gain is greater than risk, crime may appear attractive. Therefore, Bentham argued that the law should create punishment that makes crime an unattractive choice. Okay, Bentham argued that laws should be in such a way that crime becomes an unattractive choice. Coming to the Bentham's view of punishment, Bentham believed that punishment itself is an evil. It is a very important thing that Bentham has propounded. He practically thought that punishment was really an evil because it causes pain. Therefore, punishment should not be used unnecessarily. It should be imposed only when it prevents a greater harm. According to Bentham, punishment is justified when it helps to prevent a future crime, deter potential offenders, incapacitate dangerous offenders, reform offenders, and protect society. So these are the criteria where punishment can be justified. In other cases, punishment has, according to Bentham, not much value or not much of importance. So this approach has influenced modern ideas of deterrence, coercion, and crime prevention. Okay, so these were the ideas of Jeremy Bentham. Next, we are moving with another ideas of him, that is panopticon prison. Panopticon prison is very important in criminology and most important in penology, which is a subfield of criminology. Bentham proposed the prison design called panopticon. In 18th century, he designed practically a prison system that was called panopticon prison. The panopticon prison was designed as a circular prison with a central observation tower. Prisoners would not know when they were being watched because they might be watched at any time. They would be expected to behave in a disciplined manner. The panopticon became an important concept in discussions about prisons, surveillance, discipline, and state power. So panopticon prison is basically a surveillance system. There is a central watchtower, and the inmates, the prisoners, are being watched periodically in a way that prisoners don't know when they are being watched. In this way, it is believed that the thought of constant observation onto the prisoners will bring about reformative sense in the prisoners. So this is the prime motive or prime objective of panopticon prison system. So, however, the panopticon system is also criticized because of constant surveillance, which can affect privacy, dignity, and human freedom. So, regarding the human rights, regarding the privacy, dignity, and human freedom, everyone has objective on everything. In the prison system also, people have criticism regarding that. So coming towards the merits of classical school of criminology, so the classical school made major contributions to criminology and criminal justice. First, it opposed cruelty, arbitrary and excessive punishment. Second, it promoted the rule of law. Thirdly, it supported equality before law. Fourthly, it introduced the principle of proportional punishment. Fifthly, it developed the theory of deterrence. Sixth, it encouraged clear laws, fair trials, and limited judicial discretion. Seventhly, it influenced modern criminal justice systems across the world. Many modern legal principles, including fair trial, legality, proportionality, and sentencing rules, reflect classical ideas. So these were the merits of classical schools, and these merits are actually reflected in present system. Now, at the end of the classical school, we must see the critical views on classical school. So, although the classical school is important, it has several limitations. First, it assumes that all people are rational and capable of making free choices. So it's the basic assumption of classical school of criminology. But people may commit crime due to mental illness, due to addiction, trauma, poverty, peer pressure, emotional disturbances, or social inequality. Second, it focuses mainly on the offense rather than individual offender. For example, two persons may commit the same offense, but their personal circumstances may be very different. One may be the first time offender acting under the pressure, while another may be a habitual offender. So thirdly, it doesn't adequately explain juvenile delinquency. Child may not have the same maturity, understanding, or decision-making ability as adults. And fourthly, it doesn't sufficiently consider social and economic causes of crime. The classical school of criminology doesn't go deep into the structural causes or root causes of crime, the factors of crime. It just goes into the periphery of free will, into the dimensions of pleasure and pain, etc. It doesn't go deep inside the criminal behavior, why people commit crime. It doesn't go in depth into the structural causes of crime. Therefore, later criminologists developed new theories to explain crime through biological, psychological, or sociological factors. So, with this, we come to the end of classical school of criminology. I think we have gone with very in-depth with the classical school of criminology, and interested viewers may revisit various terminology like philosophic calculus or hedonistic calculus, pleasure and pain principle, utilitarianism, and torture abolishment, proportionality of crime, certainty of crime, and arbitrary laws, etc. So we have finished the classical theory of crime. In the next video, I think 3.5, we are going to discuss about neoclassical school. Actually, my video is like, my avatar is moving here and there, so I think is it better to discuss the neoclassical school in another video, maybe right now in 1 minute or so you can be able to see that in this channel, but still 10 people are there online. So should I go with the another video, or I should be here explaining in this video? Can't see, even I don't know that how the setbacks are there. So setbacks, so you can answer me if you want me to explain the neoclassical school of criminology here itself. Okay, since many people is here, so I am going to explain the neoclassical school of criminology here, continuing with this video, even though my avatar is not working properly. Maybe I don't know why, maybe because I don't have a pro subscription of the streaming platform. So I'm sorry if it is not going synchronous with my audio. So I am going with the neoclassical school of criminology. Okay, the neoclassical school developed during the 19th century as a modification of the classical school. Neoclassical thinkers accepted the basic idea of free will and individual responsibility. But they recognized that all persons do not have the same capacity to make rational decisions. They understand that age, mental condition, circumstances, and external pressure can affect a person's ability to choose. Therefore, The Neoclassical school introduced flexibility into punishment. Instead of treating every offender in exactly the same way, courts should consider the circumstances of the offense and the condition of the offender. Moving ahead with the main principles of Neoclassical school, the first principle is qualified free will. From the classical free will, Neoclassical school of criminology filtered it into a qualified free will principle. The Neoclassical school doesn't completely reject the free will principle. However, it says that free will may be limited to some cases. For example, a child, a person with serious mental illness, or a person acting under coercion may not have the same level of choices as ordinary adult offenders. Therefore, criminal responsibility should depend on the person's actual capacity and circumstances. This is the first principle of Neoclassical school of criminology, that is qualified free will principle. Next principle is individualization of punishment. The Neoclassical school supports individualization of punishment. This means that punishment shouldn't depend on the offense itself. It should also consider the offender. Neoclassical school goes on the punishment should not be based solely on the offense. It stresses that the punishment should also be considered with respect to the offender. What courts may consider? They may consider the age of the offender, the mental condition, the motive, and most importantly is the previous criminal record of the offender, degree of participation, whether the offender acted under pressure or not, whether the offender showed remorse or not, whether the offender is likely to reform or not. This principle is widely used in modern sentencing. So the principle of individualization of punishment is a very important principle of Neoclassical school of criminology. Moving ahead with the mitigation circumstances. Mitigation circumstances is also one of the principles. A mitigating circumstance is a factor that may reduce severity of punishment. For example, young age, mental incapacity, provocation, coercion or threat, lack of criminal history, genuine remorse, minor role in the offense, or lack of intention. These are the mitigating circumstances. Okay? For example, a person who commits an offense under serious threat may deserve different treatment from the person who planned the same offense voluntarily. Coming to the next principle of Neoclassical school of criminology, it is the recognition of juvenile offenders. The Neoclassical school recognized that children should not be treated in the same way as adult offenders. Children may lack maturity and may be more capable to reform. This idea later influenced juvenile justice system, like the Juvenile Justice Act of India or JJ Act, Juvenile Justice Act in 2015 and its subsequent amendment I think in 2019 and 21 also, like that. In India, children alleged to be in conflict with law are dealt with under the Juvenile Justice Care and Protection of Children Act 2015, which focuses primarily on care, protection, and rehabilitation, and as well as social recognition. So the other significance of Neoclassical school of criminology is that limited judicial discretion. The classical school wanted to reduce the judicial discretion because judges could misuse the power. The Neoclassical school accepted that some judicial discretion is necessary. However, this discretion should be guided by law and shouldn't become arbitrary. This balance remains important in modern sentencing. So with this we come to the end of Neoclassical School of Criminology. We have gone with various principles of Neoclassical schools like limited judicial discretion, recognition of juvenile offenders, mitigating circumstances like young age, mental incapacity, provocation, coercion or threat, etc. Next, the individualization of punishment, then qualified free will, which come from which refined from the free will principle of classical school of criminology. So these are the characteristics or principles of neoclassical school of criminology. So if we go with classical and neoclassical school, we'll find some key differences. Okay, so what are the key differences of classical and neoclassical school of criminology? On the basis of on what basis classical theory, classical school of criminology goes on? It goes on the basis of free will. In classical school, it goes on the basis of full free will. In neoclassical, it goes on free will exists but may be limited. On classical school, the focus on crime and criminal act. Whether on neoclassical school, the focus is on crime and offenders' circumstances. The punishment, on the other hand, in the classical school is fixed and proportionate. In neoclassical school, it is flexible and individualized. The responsibility lies on the classical school is on generally equal for all normal person. For all normal persons, the responsibility comes equals. The responsibility of crime comes equals. While in neoclassical school, the responsibility varies according to age, according to mental condition and various circumstances. The judicial discretion in neoclassical school, in classical school of criminology is very limited. In neoclassical school of criminology, there are certain limited but necessary judicial discretion. Treatment of children was similar to legal responsibility approach of the adults in classical school of criminology. However, in neoclassical school, special treatment and reduced responsibility of children and juvenile offenders are provided there. Mitigating factors are less emphasis is given on mitigating factors in classical school, but in neoclassical school, strong emphasis is given on mitigating factors. So how these classical and neoclassical schools come relevant in modern criminal justice system? The classical and neoclassical school of criminology remain very relevant today. Classical ideas are reflected in rule of law. They are reflected in equality before law, in fair trial, clear criminal laws, proportionality of punishment, in deterrence, in the protection against arbitrary punishment, etc. While neoclassical school of criminology ideas are reflected in sentencing, in discretion, consideration of mitigating factors. In juvenile justice, neoclassical ideas are very important. Mental incapacity and criminal responsibility in such premises, neoclassical ideas are very much important. Probation and reformative approaches are very much important of neoclassical school of criminology. And lastly, individualized sentencing, which is very important factor which we have derived from neoclassical school of criminology. So thus classical schools and neoclassical schools have given various premises of criminal laws or criminal justice system that's how it is evolving over time. If we give an example of India, in India the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, which was framed in 2023, it defines offences and punishment, while the Bharatiya Nagarik Suraksha Sanhita 2023 provides procedural safeguards. These laws reflect the broader constitutional commitment to fairness, legality, due process, and equality before law. So if we go to the present criminal laws criminal laws of India, there are 3 acts. One is BNS, that is Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita 2023. One is Bharatiya Nagarik Suraksha Sanhita, that is BNSS 2023, and one is Indian Evidence Act, which was earlier Indian Evidence Act, but now is Bharatiya Saksha Adhiniyam, or BSA. It is 2023, all are framed in July 2023. Courts may also consider individual circumstances while deciding a bail, sentencing, probation, and rehabilitations. Courts also consider the previous judgments of high courts in its jurisdiction, or maybe that of Supreme Court. Yes, of course, that of Supreme Court. So this is criminal justice process, or this is law, but as we are studying criminology, we will not go in deep into the very legal system. We are just touching them, and we are actually going in depth into the classical and neoclassical school of criminology in this lecture. So summarizing today's lecture, the classical school emerged during the Enlightenment as a reaction against torture, arbitrary punishment, and unequal justice. Classical school is based on free will, rationality, hedonism, social contract, legality, equality before law, proportionality, and deterrence. Cesar Beccaria, who is the proponent of classical school, or who is the father of criminology, he argued for clear laws, certain punishment, proportionate punishment, and abolition of torture. Jeremy Bentham, another proponent of classical school of criminology, he developed utilitarianism and explained crime through pleasure and pain. The neoclassical school modified classical ideas by recognizing that people differ in age, mental capacity, and circumstances. It introduced mitigating factors, individualized punishments, and special treatment for juveniles. The central message of both the school is that punishment must be lawful. It must be fair, proportionate, and directed towards protecting society. So this is our, I think, third lecture, where we have gone very deep into the classical and neoclassical school of criminology. We have learned principles and premises of these schools and how these schools have contributed into the modern criminal justice system. In the next lecture, we will be studying the positive school of criminology, including the theories of Cesar Lombroso, Enrico Ferri, and Raffaello Garofalo in details. So thank you for watching, and if you find the lecture useful, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. That is our Anonymous channel, and in this Anonymous channel, we are starting this criminology live sessions. If you like it, please comment it. How should I improve it? This is still a beta process. I don't know if I will be continuing it or not, but I will try to improve it with better avatars and better interfaces. Okay, so that's all for today's. If you want a quick revision, I can go through it. It's a classical school, which is a crime is a rational choice made through free will. This is classical school in simple terms. Main thinkers of classical school were Cesar Beccaria and Jeremy Bentham. Key concept of classical school were free will, rationality, pleasure and pain, deterrence, social contract, legality, proportionality, and equality before law. While next, coming to neoclassical school, the key concepts and the premises were free will exists, but responsibility may vary according to the age. It focused on mental condition and circumstances. Key concepts of neoclassical schools were mitigating factors, individualized punishment, juvenile justice, limited judicial discretion. So judicial discretion also was one of the key concepts of Neoclassical school of criminology. So with this, I come to the end of third lecture of criminology on the classical and neoclassical school. In the next lecture, we will move ahead with probably positive school of criminology with focus on Cesare Lombroso, Enrico Ferri, and Raffaello Garofalo. I will try to make that tomorrow. If you have any thought regarding this video or regarding our live sessions, you can write in the comment box, and see you again probably tomorrow. And happy reading. I'll check if there are some messages. I don't find any messages. I don't know if there are any messages. I don't know actually how to check messages. Okay, it's coming enter set, but how to show set box? Show set box. I know hide set view. I don't know how show set view. Someone setting or not? Probably not. Actually, I don't know how to do it. So anyway, goodbye. Have a nice day or good night.